they will also be with us to see them. They are militant in the protection of the prevention of violence in school in the city of Oujda. After this opening session, we will move to another workshop. It will be chaired by also Madame Najat Mjid from the UN, Tracy Vaillancourt, a teacher or a professor from Ottawa, Canada, and also Mr. Hisham Ait Mansour, the High Body of Evaluation, and Shafaqi from the High Assessment and Scientific Research. Mr. President, the representative of the UNICEF in Morocco, the representative of the UN, the director of the National Body of Assessment, members of the Council, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to chair this session, and here I come back to this building, to these premises, where I have worked for years, and to preside this session on issues relevant to violence against women, against children, and violence in schools. With no further delay, I give the floor to Mjid Allah, the rep of the UN. You have the floor. Thank you. Rahma. I am pleased, let me to say congratulations to Yusuf, Shayma, Mehdi, and Duha. Excellent. For me today, I don't like protocols. Maybe you know me. We will shorten this. I am really happy to be here. I have met many people and many friends. What makes me feel sad? It is a repeated debate. This is not the first time we do that. And here, I hope, frankly, that this meeting not only a meeting and we be redundant with no action. And I think the children are saying something very important. The trust in institution, and this all over the world. Children, they lose confidence and trust in schools. I try to say why for me and why I am here happy, and I would like to thank the organizers, and I am delighted that there is the seminar not only to talk the findings of the study that I had the pleasure to know, but also to mix and have all this mixture of knowledge and practice, and I hope we will achieve something more concrete. This seminar never has been of an urgent for protecting school. I would recall that from now by 2030 that all the actors are committed to the Sustainable Development Goals is to make an end to all kinds of violence in all institutions, including school, and to have a quality school. In the 2030 agenda, also, we are calling for equity against violence. So we are 6 years behind. For me, the question that is raised everywhere, not only in Morocco, what to be done, that is promises that we conduct, they are not only slogans, and how can be translated into concrete actions. The answer is to come out with concepts, words into something concrete, to make an end to violence. Every child has the right to go to school without confronting violence, but unfortunately for millions of children, school is a place of violence. The estimations of the UNESCO April all over the world, 246 million child are encountering violence. Every month, one child out of 3 is being harassed, and 1 out of 3 is violence physically once a year. And also there is cyber harassment. It is enormous. School violence, as was said by the president, it reveals the different forms that they are interrelated. One child may encounter different types of violence. Physical, it includes insults, body assaults, psychological violence, emotional one, humiliated, we talked about dignity, sexual violence, the one based on gender, school harassment, and cyber harassment, which is a priority for the children. These violences are children are subject to these violence by their colleagues, but also by the staff and the personnel and other members. School violence, we shall not forget, but all over the world, the violence includes shooting, but I hope this is not the case here. But also, without forgetting, in school violence, we include all the attacks between schools apart from the conflict. And we see this is exasperating all over the world, being in the Sahel, Ukraine, but what we see on a daily basis in Gaza today, that violence against children in schools, it is a global problem, and the violence becomes a pandemic. The other point, violence has a considerable impact on development, the mental of the child. The consequence may last for a life and to be transmitted from generation to generation. And I hope Dr. Benjeloun will talk about that. Children victims of violent school, especially harassment, cyber harassment, would lead into anxiety, depression, and it could even lead to their suicide. The children are more of absenteeism, and even they drop school. Many children never signal out the violence because of the taboo stigma that shows certain form of violence, especially sexual violence and cyber harassment. Many children never signal the violence because they don't know how to do that. They don't have support, the problem of confidentiality. So all the children, since the early age, they feel protected and secured and finally get better. To make an end to violence, it is an investment. fruitful. It is an enormous contribution by the society. The recent study by the World Bank in 21 highlights violence in school led to the waste of 11 billion US dollar. Unfortunately, that the Ministry of Finance is not here. Children victims of violence, they may not get their potential in terms of their education. The other part, it's good to transform the school, but all the investment that we do in schools and education, they are not pertinent if we don't invest on protection and to fight for a safe environment, to invest for the well-being of the children from early age, according to this approach based on the life cycle. It is a dividend or benefit for the life of the next generation. At the end, I can tell you, make an end to violence. Microphone, please. We have a good knowledge. We will think about these solutions all over the world. Prevention, fighting violence against gender, effectiveness, and we will have a lot of examples. Good school, examples in Indonesia, safe to learn. Everywhere there are different disciplines. The question is, why aren't we progressing? That's the question to be raised. Honestly, everyone works alone, and the problem is how we switch in this approach that is intersectorial, which we call the global approach, and how complex to be implemented, because the problem that requires that clearly and honestly the right to the education of child is interconnected with the right to protection, life, and the protection of the child and their well-being involve everyone. To involve everyone does not mean we go for declarations, but who is doing what? What are the mechanisms for accountability? The fundamental question, we need a political leadership. You have this. This one would be translated into something concrete. We need strong, trained professors, have social, professional, emotional training. What is also important to have in the school environment, within the school, safe ambition means that there is a quality of curricula, and to build a step on how to promote this culture of non-violence and how to get the positive discipline. All the questions that we have, but the real debate is how to translate it. The other point, we need the mechanisms of signaling out. There were cells in Moroccan schools. We have need 2 cells for the child protection, but the problem is not to build walls, but we have people who are there to answer. You have a mechanisms of by one minister. The point is how to go to the circuit. The other point which we do not talk about is the connection with digitalization and digital education. We need to push children, the teachers, the parents in the protection on the digital environment. There are many tools, guidebooks. We can do that. The other point is to involve the entire community as school open for its environment. How to involve families. We have the Students Association, parents, and capital is how to integrate the children to be part of the solution. I am happy to hear you today, to have you here, and I know that you were interviewed for the study. You are here, but I believe it is very important to have the expert what works and what does not work. When we listen to them, is to be part of the solution which guarantees these functions for all. Honestly, I will stop here because I believe today I will listen to it. But all what I want to say, I am happy to be here. But I hope that this seminar will not be another seminar, but something that enable us to have the key to open all the doors. Thank you.
Merci نجاة, شكرا.
Thank you, Najat, for this statement.
دعوة يعني للعمل لكي لا تصبح دائما يعني.
This is a call for work in order to make of our reports and conferences translatable into practice. This is a call for work at all levels, and the statements of children this morning are great or were great. I give the floor now to Tracy Valonco. He's a teacher at the faculty from the University of Ottawa, who will talk to us about the potential, how to abort the negative impacts on children, which this presentation will be online. And this, the floor is yours, lady. Miss Valancourt, the floor is yours. We can't hear you.
And then I'll get started. Okay, so good morning. I've been listening in with great intent, and I'm really pleased with the idea of having youth participate. I think that that's really the way to go. As you said, they're experts. They should be included. So I just got to move this down real quickly so I can see. Okay, so good morning, as I mentioned. I'm just going to give an overview quickly of what's going to happen. I'm going to be speaking for about 15 minutes. I'm going to first start with youth mental health, and it's going to seem a bit interesting to start there given that we're talking about bullying victimization, but it's going to become very obvious within a few slides of why we're starting there. I'm going to talk specifically about the mental health impacts and the education impacts, and I know a lot of you have already spoken about that. And then I'm going to give a couple of hints about prevention and intervention. I'm only focusing on bullying victimization. I'm not talking about bullying perpetration. So I'm just talking about the targets of bullying, those who are treated poorly by their peers. So in terms of youth mental health, I'm from Canada, so I'll just start with a North American statistic. We have 1 in 5 who have serious mental health problems in Canada. That's a very similar statistic for what we see across Western countries. So the UK has a similar prevalence rate, the United States has a similar prevalence rate, and the prevalence rate for the world is 1 in 7. So we have a significant issue when it comes to youth mental health, and we should be worried about this. We know that suicide is a particular issue in high-income countries. So if we look at the leading cause of death for youth in high-income countries, it's suicide. It's a particular issue for boys. It accounts for almost 18% of all deaths. We know that there's enormous continuity. So about 50 to 75% of adult mental health issues, mental disorders, so actual diagnoses of mental disorders, begin before the age of 15. And I'll just give one example from our lab, a study where we've been following the same individuals from the time they were 10 all the way to now they're 26. And what we found is that if youth follow a high trajectory of just symptoms, so not disorders, of social anxiety symptoms from grade 5 to grade 12, they're 20 times more likely to meet diagnostic criteria for depression, 16 times more likely to meet diagnostic criteria for social anxiety disorder, 13 times more likely to have agoraphobia, and 13 times more likely to have generalized anxiety disorder. So we're talking about youth, and yet here I'm talking about the continuity of mental health. And there's a good reason for this. We know that mental health and problems in adults are the leading cause of disability worldwide. The thing is that children are nested within families. And we know from the research literature that the mental health of youth is strongly linked to the mental health of caregivers. So we want caregivers to be healthy to help with their kids, and then therefore help kids be healthier as well. We know, and this is true across the world, that the risk is not equally shared. So, for example, in my country, in Canada, socioeconomically disadvantaged youth are more likely to have mental health problems, up to 40% greater likelihood. We know that girls are more affected than boys for almost all disorders, with the exception of externalizing problems and autism spectrum disorder. In Canada, and it's true across the world, there are enormous service gaps. So we have so many children not doing well in terms of mental health, and then we have only 20% of them receiving services. So even in the most economically advanced countries in the world, there are not enough clinicians, there's not enough resources to help children. And those who do get help are those who have severely impairing mental disorders, which really means that they have externalizing problems. And everybody else who has internalizing problems like anxiety or depression are suffering in silence. We also know, for example, in Canada, that recent immigrants and refugees are less likely to access mental health care. So I'm starting with mental health because bullying causes mental health issues. So scientists like myself aren't ones to come out and make causal statements unless the evidence is really compelling. The evidence comes from longitudinal studies, which I'm going to present. So when I'm talking about bullying, I'm talking about a systematic abuse of power. So we're talking about a spectrum where we're at the end of that spectrum, where the individual doesn't have the power to defend themselves, where it happens over and over again, where it's incredibly distressing to them. We know that it's a world issue, and I know that this has been said. I've listened to other speakers mention this. If you look at this heat map, it goes all the way over to beyond 40% of kids involved. You see that every country is represented with a serious issue. We know that the world prevalence is 30%. 30% of youth are bullied occasionally, and 10% of youth are bullied every day. So what does that mean in terms of numbers? So if we just focus in on the age group of 5 to 14, that would roughly translate to over 134 million youth being bullied worldwide. We know that bullying decreases, so we can add a little bit more to this. These are trajectories of bullying from grade 5 to grade 12. You see a big notable decrease once they get into high school. So I'm estimating probably about 180 million children worldwide are bullied all the time. So that's the extreme level. So I mentioned that bullying causes mental health issues. And the reason it does is because it interferes with the priority of relationships. The need to belong is a fundamental human motivator. We know from the research literature that dates back forever, so 40, 50, 60 years, that social ties are not just a luxury, they're actually essential for optimal human development. Bullying victimization thwarts this fundamental need to belong, and for this reason, it negatively impacts all aspects of functioning and derails children's potential. Here are just a few of the concurrent correlates. So this is in the immediate what happens when youth are bullied. They have academic difficulties, increased absenteeism, they have more somatic complaints, stress-related illnesses, physical health problems, low self-esteem, depression, social withdrawal, social anxiety, loneliness. Some take their own life, and some get upset and are aggressive towards others. Our own studies show that the evolution is from a person who is first victimized and then becomes a bully. So poorly treated youth either get mad or they get sad, and that happens in the immediate, but also has long-term implications. So we've written extensively on this, and so have others. There's this fantastic meta-analysis that was published in 2017 in the top psychiatric journal in the world. And their conclusion was, and keep in mind, a medical journal, we're going to have conservative viewpoints. Their conclusion, based on the meta-analytic findings of longitudinal studies, was that there was strong evidence of a causal relation between bullying victimization and mental health problems and substance use. We also reviewed the literature. We looked at what happens in childhood and adolescence and how it affects the long-term outcomes in adulthood, and they're not good. And I'll give a few examples. So in one study, they looked at health outcomes based on being bullied in childhood, and then they looked at these individuals and how they were doing when they were age 23 and 50. And what they found was that there was greater depression, anxiety, and suicidality in this group. What's really interesting is that they said that the effects were similar to those of being placed in public or substitute care, and an index of multiple childhood adversities, which means that they're saying that this was just as bad as kids who were placed in foster care, just as bad as kids who were maltreated by their caregivers, just as bad as kids who were living in extreme poverty. In another study where they used two cohorts, it's a really interesting study. So they used a UK longitudinal cohort that's representative of their country and one from the United States. They compared whether or not an individual was bullied in childhood, maltreated by their caregivers, so child abuse, or had both experiences in the prediction of adult mental health. And I know this is small, so I'll just tell you that it replicates across studies, but I'll give you one example in terms of overall mental health. So this is what happened in childhood and now how they're faring in adulthood. There was 1.7 times more likely to have mental health problems than if they hadn't had any kind of abuse. So that's our reference. So child abuse had an odds ratio of 1.7. Being bullied had an odds ratio, the highest odds ratio of 4.7 compared to both being bullied and being maltreated. So bullying was more problematic to the mental health of individuals in adulthood than child maltreatment. There was a meta-analysis done by Maria Tofty who looked at whether or not victims of bullying become depressed in later life. They looked up to 36 years later, and the answer was yes. There was strong evidence for that. There's also individual and societal and economic impacts, and I know they were mentioned, but I'll just highlight one study here. This looked at what the individual and societal economic impacts were up to 4 decades after the abuse occurred. They found that kids who were bullied in childhood had lower employment in midlife. This impacted their midlife income and their accumulated wealth, which then will also have an effect on their children's lives and their children's lives. So there's a generational effect. It had a higher societal employment cost for men and a higher social service cost for women. What about the educational impacts? And I know they've been mentioned, so I'll just be really brief here. We collated all of the literature. We have a pretty comprehensive review that was just published in Aggressive and Violent Behavior. And what we found is that it affects all academic functioning. So lower grades, poor attendance, poor engagement, and greater dropout. But a lot of times it worked in an indirect effect. So it takes a few years to kind of see the effects on grades. Because what happens is when kids are bullied, they first stop going to school. So the attendance goes down. And the poor attendance then affects their grades downstream. So it's really important when we're looking at academic outcomes to look at it over several years. I just want to also point out the neurobiological effects of bullying victimization. So we have a very comprehensive review that was just published in Frontiers in Neuroscience. We looked at all of the literature across the world, and what we found was that bullying not only affects the mental health and academic potential of youth, but also gets under the skin to confer a risk. So it actually affects their biological reality. So just to give you a little bit of background, one thing that we've discovered about 10 to 15 years ago was that the parts of your brain that are activated when you experience physical pain, the physical pain network, so if you hit your head on the wall by accident, it causes pain, your brain lights up, it says, hey, this is what pain is. That is the same areas that are activated when a person experiences social pain, when they're rejected, when they're bullied, when they're ostracized. So this discovery of the idea that physical pain and social pain share similar neural structures explains in a way the mechanism of why bullying lasts so long, even after the pain, after the experience of being bullied took place. And it's likely linked to our evolution. So there's a high probability that what's happened in terms of evolution is that we needed a neural alarm that we weren't belonging to motivate us to belong. So this explains why bullying hurts so much. Here's an example from the neurobiology literature. So in this study, they looked at childhood bullying involvement in the prediction of inflammation in adulthood. Inflammation is terrible. It's terrible for your overall health. It's linked to cardiovascular problems, to brain-based disorders. It's linked to it's linked to cancers and the like. So here you see that these individuals were not being bullied anymore, but in adulthood, they still had the highest inflammation rates. So that experience of being bullied carried through to the future. We have a model, a neurobiological model that has a lot of evidence to support it. What we've shown is that bullying victimization affects the stress response system, which is called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. This has an effect on memory and learning. So maybe the learning issues are not just about them not going to school, but also it affects their brain, their prefrontal cortex and their hippocampus in particular. This also relates to disruptive neurogenesis, so the ability to make new formations and the like in the brain. And all of this biological cascade implicates mental health issues like depression and anxiety. So bullying is a serious issue. It gets under the skin. It confers a risk in the immediate and in the future. And I'll just talk quickly about prevention and intervention. So when we look at the effectiveness of school bullying interventions, and I know the last speaker she touched on this, and we're on the same page actually. It's interesting because Tofty and Farrington came out in 2011 with their meta-analysis, and they showed a reduction of about 20 to 23% for bullying perpetration and about 17 to 20% for victimization. And a new recent meta-analysis came out of 100 studies, and they showed very similar rates. So we're reducing bullying a little bit, but we're not reducing it a lot. And one of the things that's quite problematic is that Yiger et al. Showed that it was only really effective, our efforts up into middle school. So we have an enormous issue that causes harm to kids, and yet we can't get this down. So we need to be thinking about how and why. We just published this paper on looking at it's a review of the literature on bullying before and during the COVID-19 pandemic. And one thing we noticed, and we'd never seen this before, were massive declines in bullying worldwide, with a very few exceptions. So if kids were in school or where they weren't, obviously if they weren't in school, bullying should reduce. But even if they were in school during the pandemic, we saw declines. And why is that the case? And there was a huge hint that came from this paper. And basically that if you increase supervision, that we saw reductions in bullying. So I think we need to be looking at this literature of what happened and why we reduced bullying up to 50% during the pandemic, and retain some of those things, test them out to protect children. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Professor Belancourt, for this conference, which shed light on the effect, I would say, the damage effect of bullying on children, and for life. أشكر السيدة.
I would like to thank Ms. Valancourt for this presentation. In fact, and following the studies, credible studies and much data reflect all that has been said, and how bullying can impact the mental health of the children in schools, and that can be instilled throughout their lives. Now I would give the floor to the Director for the National Agency for Evaluation to present the National Body for Evaluation, Ms. Shafiq Erqiya from the Survey and Analysis Specialist, National Body for Education, to present to us the results of the study as a whole. Thank you very much, Ms. Roqaya. Study that has been launched or initiated by you yourself. It was a pleasure to work with you, Ms. Barqaya. I want to contextualize this knowledge and this study in the international context. You are all experts and you've worked on such topics. I'm going to be brief to give the floor to my colleague Raqiya to present the study. You've mentioned a lot of things, and there are analysis and a corpus of analysis that we handle throughout the studies. I've consulted some of them, 4 or 3 that have been conducted in other international institutions, and there are some common points. I would like to emphasize the 3 principal consequences of violence in schools. First, mental health. It keeps returning over and over, and the school performance, criminality, and deviation. So children may go astray. Over the last 20 years, many studies have been conducted, and I'm talking here about authors who have come out with certain results. Some delinquents, and also the performance is impacted. When we deal with violence, the impact is important, is stronger on the mental aspects of the mental faculties of children, and then comes the school performance, and also the involvement in some criminal activities or indulgence in such activities. This also represents insecurity for children. It gives them this victimization feeling in schools, and that's why we talk today about the school climate, which is multidimensional, which leads us to the study that my colleague Rqia will present to you. To conclude, I'll mention a very important point, is that the combating such violence in schools will protect the mental health, and that's why we'll honor the children who are here. When we are players against this violence, the mental health will be protected in that way. Good morning. I have the honor to present to you the results of the evaluation of violence in schools in Morocco. This presentation will start by mentioning the referential framework. This morning it's been presented by Mr. the President. This refers to the Constitution of the Kingdom of Morocco of 2011, which insists on the right to modern, accessible and quality education according to Article 22, and also there's the strategic vision of 2015-2030, which is devoted to create levers to create more good conditions for healthy education. And there are different laws and circulars that deals with this issue of violence. The last law of 51/17 that deals with the education, and then the ratification of Morocco of international agreements regarding the children's rights in 1993, which has pushed the country to protect the rights of children in Morocco. Our objective during this evaluation was to measure the prevalence of this violence in schools, understanding its shapes, its players, the perpetrators and victims alike, and also the personnel or the staff, the education staff, and determine the factors that pushes this violence further. Our methodology has combined different aspects, a review of the different existing document to elaborate a conceptual framework for this evaluation. We did so, and then we moved on to the regulatory bodies or texts to go in parallel with national policies, and also we've conducted field surveys to collect data. The first semester of the 2021-2022 data collection from schools during that school year, from primary school to high school. 250 schools, 260 schools have been targeted by this qualitative research, targeting 13,884 students were targeted by this study, and also this has been complemented by a qualitative survey of 27 schools, and even parents were included in that. We have also to mention our methodology that this evaluation is based on the declarations or revelations of children and and their analysis. They've been analyzed. These declarations have been analyzed using appropriate methodologies to extract relevant information and data. The conceptual framework that leads this evaluation is based on victimization approach. It privileges the point of view of the victims, gives them priority. We give a chance to the student to express themselves, or himself or herself, how they live on a daily basis in the schools. And this approach reflects the environment in schools and the conditions of this victimization in order to be able to treat all the correlation that exists between the school environment and which can favor or prevent such violence from occurring. When we analyze the text, the legal documents and decrees and governmental text, we have a great disposition to curb such violence in our schools, and this tackles three measures: educational, administrative, and judicial or legal. The Minister of National Education has put forth instruments like the integrated instruments for combating violence in schools in 2007, and also the MARSAD, which registers all the cases of violence in schools, which was created. This platform was created in 2050. As Mr. Majid has mentioned this morning, the public schools had demonstrated some limitations in dealing with this issue. So we have a discrepancy between the different elements, and also lack of knowledge of all the dispositions against violence, the educators, administration, and so on, alongside the problem of data collection and reporting. This has this power struggle that renders these children more victimized. The adult who is a teacher and this relationship between them and the students is controversial. During our analysis, we analyzed the data and we've come out with different types of violence that exist in our schools, with sometimes worrying prevalence, as the scheme, as this diagram shows, the violence, physical violence. So the students the report sometimes report certain confrontation, physical confrontation, and also verbal violence is widely known in our schools. 36% in schools in Morocco suffer from this mockery. And as for harassment, it's suffered by 15% in primary schools and 29% in other high school levels. So students who have reported that they were harassed during their primary school, they declare that, they report that, and it's purely sexual. The physical violence also takes much space. In primary schools, 8% of schools are victims of messaging, of inappropriate messages. Secondary schools or high schools suffer also from photos, from the receiving such inappropriate video content. So the authors of violence and the perpetrators vary, but mostly they belong to the institutions in rural areas where the incidents on the path on the road to the school may occur on the roads or on the way to schools. Boys are the perpetrators of verbal and physical abuses like insults, mockery, and physical confrontation. In secondary schools, 55.5% of schools indicate that the authors of mockery also suffered as students in the primary school and so on. In primary school, there are more than 47% of schools who reported being beaten by their teachers. This graph demonstrates the authors of sexual harassment, which is not different from the other perpetrators. It concerns both secondary and primary school, with variations that go higher for high school. We notice that the boys are the perpetrators for this sexual harassment, and then we have girls, and then teachers themselves. As for punishment in the school environment, they rely there as this there's this physical confrontation that is subject to punishment in the schools. As these two graphs demonstrate, we notice that 28% of primary schools declare having been beaten by an instrument. This percentage increases to 30%, especially the junior high school level. 7% of primary schools and 17 from high schools report having been slapped on the face and also being abused physically, like they touched on their ears, or falaka. Also punishment, a traditional way to punish students, represents a percentage of 2% who reported that. In order to be more precise regarding our methodology, our evaluation has dealt with the environment in schools and the correlation that may exist between the environment and the experiences of victimization that these students have lived. We have to also mention the feeling of fear that some students have regarding some corners, especially toilets. Be it in primary or secondary schools, toilets represent a place of that necessitates more security. 38% of students and 47% are worried to go to the toilet. Also, the path to school, the road to school, and also the exit of schools necessitates more security to protect the children from violence. So students have been interrogated regarding the presence of violence in their school environments. Once more, the percentage reveal worrying situation at two levels: 52% of primary and 62% of secondary school reveal or report that this violence exists in their institutions. Violence touches upon the teachers. 6%, more than 6% of teachers declare or report having been subject to harassment. The perpetrators of these violations or this violence are different. So 35% thus implicates the school staff, and 27% of the students, and 19% of the represents the parents. So the Marsad platform that I mentioned is for reporting these types of violence. This platform is largely unknown to the teachers, because the 3/4 of the teachers revealed that they don't know that this platform existed. To conclude, and based on the results of this evaluation, it presents certain patterns of reflection that would correspond to the demands of the students attending with us. It's essential to create policies to combat these types of violence, which is coherent, to invest in high quality education. This signifies not only improving the programs, the educational programs, but also create an environment in which the students may feel or will feel safe and secure. It is necessary to have all these institutional dispositions in place to sensitize all the stakeholders and take clear-cut and clearly stated decisions and take solid positions regarding these types of violence in schools and be more specific, thus and even severe to say against this sexual harassment, cyber violence, and so on and forth. We have to promote a code of conduct against the violence in schools and try to envision certain types of measures to improve the security in schools in general. As for pedagogically speaking, teachers have to be well trained to promote certain methodologies without violence. And then finally mobilize all the players, parents, schools, community, and media to prevent this violence from occurring in our schools. This also creates a base for orientation to lead the student, to sensitize the student to avoid such violence, where students can blossom and grow and thrive in a protected environment. So this presentation doesn't allow me to present the whole details. I would invite you to download this presentation and this evaluation from the website of the Council. And thank you very much. It's available in French.
Thank you, Kia, for this presentation that has been faithful to the report. As we have said, she has shed light onto important aspects. This shows the degree of the prevalence of violence in schools is quite high. Well, the second point concerns mainly, even when we put in place instruments, they don't work. She has shown well in what concerns the observatory. There is still a lot of work to do. We come back to the call made by Najat. Call to action, action and action and action. We have some minutes for the debate. If there are any questions, we open the floor for a question-answer session. Mrs. Laziz. Thank you, Mrs. Chairperson. I represent the Ministry of National Education, Ilham Laziz, responsible for the digital. As Mrs. Jid has said, there is still a lot of effort to do. What I wish to share, what we do in terms of accompaniment in digital inclusion since 2005, since the program that was set off by the Minister of Education at the time. Mr. Habib Malki, since the beginning of the digital inclusions, we saw to the training of teachers for the secure usage of internet, and then after the internet day a few years back, to give the children the possibility to understand that internet is a place, as it is the case of a road, where we can find the good and the bad that we need to cross. For 15 years that the ministry has been working on the good usage of internet, we have realized that cyber harassment was closely linked to violence in school environment. It happens that since 2002, in addition to fighting cyber harassment, we started working on violence in school environments, because one feeds into the other. And we have with us two specialists in this field in France and in Morocco, Mr. Jean-Pierre Belot and Mrs. Amal Hassoun, who will give their testimonial about what they did with the Centre Regis at the Ministry of National Education. First, as pilot studies in 2002 after the COVID-19 at the level of the Academy of Rabat Salkanitra, and also at the TTH Academy in Tangier, where we started working on the setup of a team dedicated to violence in school environment of teachers and advisors and social workers, in order to identify violence and detect violence which is real at schools, which is fed into by cyber harassment. These two pilot experiences have shown us, as it is the case of other countries where such processes have been put in place, we managed to make violence and cyber harassment regress by 80%. And this has been shown by a presentation of Jean-Pierre Milon, who is at the origin of the method of the shared preoccupation, where the harasser and the harassed are put in a situation, both of them, to sort out their problem with the teaching team and with the parents and with all the other players. We have tested it out at the beginning in 6 schools in Rabat, and then in 62 schools in Tangier with a follow-up. We don't just train experts, move and ensure a follow-up, and also work with children. When I saw children, I was really satisfied, because in this program there are children ambassadors. When the teaching body do their work, the children continue working on such problems. Tomorrow's workshop, which will be moderated by my colleague Madame Ben Muslims, to discover what is being done in Europe and what is done at our ministry. We are going to launch this school year 23-24 the generalization program through the training of trainees. We have made a choice at the ministry, because I cannot work on the through cycles, to work on middle schools, so where there is where it is maximum violence. Wrecked in high school, such violence diminishes because children start being aware of this. And in primary schools, even if there are violent cases, they are less in intensity. Our strategy will start with mid-school between 23 and 26, in order to put in 2,200 middle schools. 3 people will be trained, accompanied, followed up on, or also in initial training and in continuous training, where teachers, trainees at the CMF will also be sensitized. This way we will gain on time. We don't have to wait for them to train them. This is what I wanted to share with him, what the ministry is doing. My colleagues tomorrow will present to you the whole study. I think it's a good follow-up between the study that was done in 2022 and that I share. Such violences exist. We'll continue beating children. We beat them not only in schools, but we beat them up at homes. I'm not going to dwell a lot about cyber harassment. We've been working on this for quite a long time, but this physical violence, this is what we've been doing at the ministry. Thank you, Mrs. Thank you. Good morning, Salah Aziz. I'm present here today among the team of the Moroccan Association of the Inspectors of Secondary Schools in Morocco. This association that worked with the Higher Council of Education since its inception. So we are cognizant of all the studies and reports and all the meetings that this constitutional institution has undertaken since its constitution. I would like to point out that this institution is working in accordance with very precise methodology, scientific methodology, and that the recommendations and reports that have been presented would meet the aspirations of the schools in Morocco. I'm saying this to show the importance of this meeting today, and I'm sure it will be successful, from which will come very important recommendations. There's no great proof then that the presentations that have been presented, I consider them, and I am about to retire. This is training, because training is a lifelong act. And here I would like to focus on the importance of this meeting, and I focus on the importance of recommendations that come from the Higher Council. So I have a recommendation that is the implementation of recommendations. A recommendation to implement recommendations. Another point, we always hear about 2030. We hope that 2030 would be a very big festivity where we can have a good, high-quality school. I talked about the importance of this issue, about what the ministry is doing. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the ministry, and what Mrs. Ilham has said, talked about what has been done. But there are efforts. I would like to add another effort, and we have a call to attend a meeting at the Academy for Bath next Tuesday on a project called ATP2C, which is a support of civism, citizenship, and prevention of risk conduct or risk behavior. This is a project, AP2TC, on which we have been working. I attend with them as an inspector, but when we attend our meetings, there are certain schools that are concerned, in middle schools and high schools. This is a very well-funded, financed project, but who works? We work inside the schools, but who works there? I would like to come back to the issue that is clubs. I have a question. The study that was undertaken about violence in rural areas, it's true that its evaluation rested on the declaration of students. It's very important to involve children, and here I would like to thank the children present here today, and I tell them bravo, because that child, when he sat there, I personally felt goosebumps, because he managed to vehicle and impart the message with high professionalism. Because to share a message, it's not easy. It's a very deep message, and he managed to share it with us in that way. Second, children. When we have children present, then what we have is to expect great results. And here I would like to commend wholeheartedly the children present here today. We have understood your message. So, clubs now. This project ATP2C is about the promotion of educational work in schools, and it's the consecration of the culture of citizenship, and to also consolidate positive behavior and conduct. So, such clubs, I don't know if the study has contacted the clubs or not. Such clubs have been present in schools for years now. Now it's high time to do an evaluation. Such clubs, what did they do? They do with very modest means. And I would like to go back to the meeting that took place. There are animators or coordinators of such clubs who usually is a voluntary teachers or professors, and we have what we call social support officials in schools. But the question that crops up is the initial training and continuous training, initial training of professors, directors, aides, these supports that should be trained in this field. and our training also, because when we are present in such meetings with our modest training and the means at our disposal don't help much, it would be preferable it should be at a high level, because we work with very modest means, so that in order to reach good results and have good recommendations, we need to think about the efficiency, efficacy, and implementability of such recommendation. I would like to come back to the activities of children. I apologize for being this long. This is a very important point I would like to mention. The national consultancy about the public school, there was the involvement of children, participation of children through workshops, that is through drawing. When we saw what the children did, what they gave us, we were very pleasantly surprised. That is their ambitions, their aspirations. They have their opinion also in curricula, school curricula. They said we have a big, huge, heavy curricula. Whenever children are present, this would lead to good results. And now we go back to the other usual act in primary schools. It was a very simple measure, but it has contributed to the reforming of the behavior of children. It was a positive act. Thank you. Thank you for having shared this experience. The gentleman there. Thank you, Mrs. Chairperson. Mr. Rashid Gabaz, an educational inspector. For me, the subject of violence in school environment doesn't concern the school only, because the educational society is part of society at large. We have the culture of violence in the streets, in stadiums, at home, within families, and also in the medias and social networks. I wish the Haka authority were present here with us, because they have a great role to play in this regard. Educational institutions in our ministry have furnished great efforts through the role of clubs, school life, values, whistleblowing on violent acts, but such efforts are not enough. Where we have excluded such subjects as artistic openness, there's now theater, now drama, now music, now drawing, and we focused only on school results, and we have produced children without values and children who bring the culture of violence in the streets into schools. So much so, schools are no longer safe. The lady talked about toilets and other places at schools that would constitute high risk on children with the absence of staff. If we were to secure safety and security for our children, we need to provide human resources that would supervise them outside the classrooms. Second thing, curricula. Our curricula do not dwell much on positive value, non-violence values, and so on. And then we go back to the other side. You have the floor. Go ahead. And then the lady here. And then we go back here. Educational greetings to all. I would like to extend my sincerest thanks for those who have invited me to this important meeting. From the presentations and quality. Could you please present yourself? I'm an inspector, retired inspector, educational inspector. As I was saying, the presentations were valuable, and I thank those who gave me this opportunity to be present here in this meeting. I would like to start from the point where my colleague has left, which is violence that we see in society at large, at school, in the media, at the street. And I would like to focus more importantly on the families. The family. the family violence, if it's not penalized, that is violence exerted on children, it means that our children will be naturalized with violence when they are subject to violence at home with justification or no such justification. Anyway, violence is unjustified when gets used to violence. So this child at school, even when he sees some attempts at fighting violence, and that is when he gets used to this violence, he will adopt another behavior, another conduct. For instance, I'm speaking out of experience in workshops on human rights, even in the classroom, when we talk about the classroom, that his body is his own and nobody else would have a right to touch him, and so on. This idea, the child doesn't understand it because he got used to violence, and it would be he would acquire it only inside the school. He's not going to be a victim of violence, but outside the school there's a whole different story. At school there's no violence. He would say, I can do everything I wish, and at home I will find myself used to this violence, more particularly when I talk about violence exerted on girls. It's a double violence inside the family or inside the school, more importantly inside the household. My recommendation is that if we wish to reject violence and condemn violence inside schools, we need to have a comprehensive approach and call upon all stakeholders in society to fight this violence and to sensitize parents and mothers in their dealing with their children. For the educational human resources, of course, mostly we talk about educational staff that rejects violence. What most important thing happens inside classrooms, and the educational staff teachers are the persons that we need to fight violence. Is the general climate, is it all are against violence? Are all educational staff and teachers are convinced about the right of children to be safe physically? And the infrastructure inside schools also, that is within the comprehensive approach. We need to look into the infrastructure of schools. For instance, we talk about rural area schools, and when there are no toilets, for instance, and somebody talked before me in that the schools are not toilets inside schools are not a safe place inside the schools. What about schools that don't have toilets? Who will be the victim of violence in that environment? Also, talking about the infrastructure, our schools insight to psychological violence. When we talk about the teaching staff and the interactive relations inside the classrooms, when we give the right to children to interact inside children, the infrastructure of our schools doesn't allow this. There is a board, the teacher, the students, and the students look at each other's back, and everybody exerts a vertical relationship. So when the children are used to horizontal relationship, and the teacher becomes a facilitator and not an orienter inside the classrooms. In this way, we can talk about a kind of violence. So, to have this, we need to fight overcrowdiness. When you have 40 or 50 children inside the classroom, how can a teacher control himself and control his class? A recommendation is the importance of school mediation, educational mediation, because it gives children the opportunity to interact and the opportunity to be positive inside society. One last point. When we talk about school violence, how do the children look at their teachers, professors, and they are violated in the streets? So when we talk to them about their rights, they are violated elsewhere. So, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. The lady. Then we come back here. Good, Claire Beaumont. I'm a professor at the Laval University in Quebec. I greet and salute all the efforts, complete efforts, and that are very well presented here. Since 2012 in Quebec, we have national monitoring on violence and intimidation at schools that ended in 2019. For 2 years, we were taking observations from schools, teachers, parents, students, like what you have done. When I know that the work you have been doing is great, so I raise my hat to it. Over the past 2 years, what we have observed, improvements, because the initiatives, the government initiatives, are similar to yours, and I know a lot. This allows me to provide some advice on which we are working now. Over the years, we realized with all the interventions done at schools, there was considerable improvement in terms of school behavior amongst themselves, less verbal or physical aggression. We measure also social violence, exclusions, above all behavior of girls with each other, and also online violence. After 9 years or 8 years, this has brought us to see if children improve in primary school, secondary school, but there is now improvement in adults. I'm talking about improvement of behavior that is verbal aggression, threats, insults, humiliations toward children, humiliations in front of the whole classroom, non-verbal behavior. This hasn't evolved from adults to children, that is, and colleagues amongst themselves. That is the model that adults can give children, and also parents towards the school staff. This leads me to focus more on adults. How do our adults behave? You are preoccupied with the well-being of the school staff. We're conscious, and the studies have shown it also. Adults are models, behavioral models. If adults are not faring well, so we don't see the good behavior we'd like to see in children. There's also the well-being. My question is that, do you have any data? Have you been talking or discussing about how to improve the well-being of school personnel? At home, there's a deterioration. Things are not going well. with adults. There are some explanations also. For example, what makes it that programs do not function as much as we do when programs are recognized as efficient by research in certain environments and certain conditions. When we apply them in other environments, we are not able to bring together the same conditions. One of the factors that is the most difficult, which sets an ambush to positive results, is the lack of preparations for adults when they are called upon to apply such programs. They didn't have enough time of training through workshops about dispute resolutions. Would they be able to resolve conflicts at schools? The other explanation why we have a lot of means of disseminations. How come children only declare 30% of the cases of violence? The adult is not able to receive such declarations, is not capable to be empathic, and even people say things are getting worse. So in a way it's a lack of know-how, whereas our teachers are more than just transmitters of academic knowledge. It's a whole education. All of this is by way of saying, are you thinking in your action plan about something to see to the well-being of the school personnel? Because it's on their well-being that rests that of our children in primary and secondary schools. Thank you. Thank you. We have kept your question, I believe. Maybe one last question. We don't have time.
Abdurrahman Mudni.
Good morning. I apologize. My presentation would sound superficial.
No. I would like to talk about 2 or 3 points. First of all, I would like to thank you for the study. I believe that the Council never... the Council is an added value. We need to work more, and the work is only for one person. It goes to the society. It is the moment for Morocco. And I believe since Morocco started with the term intention used at the World Cup, we need to get involved in the process of a sector which is fundamental. And this reform requires a lot of things, and sometimes it is very challenging. And I believe that somebody said that he hates school when the environment is appropriate. It is welcome and everybody needs to be at ease. Even if we are criticized, even the human resources should be improved. And I apologize that we need to talk about all of this. And I believe that when we talked about violence, I wanted to attend because I belong to this category that has faced I can give you the picture or an image of a child on the wheelchair going to school surrounded by 4 teachers and the headmaster, and they are talking if they will accept him or not. So he feels, the child, that he is under harassment. I believe that the human resources should be improved. I can tell you that in the verbal violence, probably not words, but some practices, the child might have a physical problem and not being involved. This is a kind of a violence, because at the end, and the school sometimes would leave the child unable. I think that the study needs also to demonstrate what is the degree of violence, and we need to work with other communes, and this approach needs to be, because we have places where there is work. Unfortunately, there are other regions they receive nothing. So the commune approach is important. We need to have its degree. I have lived an experience of the cells in a school. I remember one time a migrant from the Sahel came to me and said, my children, they don't go to school because they were bullied. We understand that there are 5 mechanisms used. And I said, what do they do? I asked him, do they come to your house? And I believe there is a problem. We don't even monitor the possibilities we have. I can tell you, there is something that can come with a solution. So I believe that the responsible in but they are not at school, regardless where the violence, they have the capacity to get mobilized, to be moved. This is an important aspect. Thank you, Mr. Mudni. We will have the last intervention, and I believe that we come over time. Beyond the time, sorry. Now we will have a delay in the agenda. I'm sure in the workshops we can talk profoundly on these themes during the workshops. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the invitation of the Council. I belong to an association that was created in 1934. It is with education and the rights of the teachers. I am happy to meet some of the colleagues. We have a team for the child protection that was created in 2006 by the Ministry of Education in collaboration with the cabinet then. So there were many stakeholders. It was a very successful experience, and I need to relate it to what Mr. Salah said. We had an experience with different experts, all these sectors, from justice, from Minister of Interior, what I want to say, it is great to have many institutions, units, and even we know that the private or public sector facilities need to carry on. We have an experience from different in different sectors. So there was a long experience for years. From 2006 to 2010. It was a very fruitful experience, and it was a capitalization on the results. Today we're sharing success stories and also to use these findings to create other projects. After the come of the president project, the training, different types of violence, oral, the body language. There are horizons in this training. We need to have a focus, concentration on type of violence that are difficult to detect. So there is a psychological violence towards children. To fight against this kind of violence, it is very difficult. It is difficult to detect this kind of violence. We need to include this psychological violence and to see a collective concept with different angles of analysis and how we see this violence that we cannot observe easily to find efficient solutions and effective one. I will give the floor to this student, Mr. Al-Khitar, coordinator combating violence in the Academy of Rabat. I would like to thank the High Council to talk about such an important issue, part of this study, and we are happy to facilitate many tasks. And here we today share its results. At the outset, let me clarify something. When we talk about violence in school, we forget to remind that the school is not the source of violence or generate violence. Why? We have done many research on children who are being subject to violence. There are social violence, so comes from society into school. For example, divorce, family disintegration, vulnerability in society. This would produce violence among children, and I believe that school, in certain cases, that the school is not part of the violence. In our common practices, we need to monitor what the school did. There are important documents, the national strategies, guidebooks, training with the UNICEF. 15 years of experience is very important. It would be our asset in the future. Sorry, the microphone. For us, there is a need to finance the project of violence in school. Most the procedures is to build certain coach centers that we need in the school, but the school, if it needs that space, it is not anymore a council or a coach center. We need to build a physical space, a coach center. And the institutions, do they have these coach centers? It resolves the problems. We need to renew the legal aspect. So we need to renew it, to review it, and to update it. And the other part about training, the fundamental of it, we need to review them about how to manage violence in schools. We shall not fail to say that the teachers who spend 10 years after graduation, they need continuous training. And we should also mention that working in combating violence, we shall not depend on voluntaria. When we'd like to change violence, we just assign a teacher or somebody who is working, collaborating with that. This is one of the important that we need to share. Thank you. Now I will try to give the work to the sister. The last word for the chat. Thank you. My name is Samira Isa. From Al-Faqih bin Sar, the region of Beni Mellal Khinifra. So, as it's been mentioned in the presentations, we all agree to combat violence in school. We need to intensify efforts of all the stakeholders and all the sectors. Microphone, because there is a relationship between diseases that could be normal or certain mental disturbance or violence. Among the mechanisms of inspecting is to notify. I have a question or a recommendation, because as in charge of this cell, that there is the absence of the child health book that needs to be describing the diagnostic of the child, and this health book, we find it most of the time empty. So if the importance of this health book is effective, we should go into prevention. Bye-bye. Mr. Yusuf. Salam. I would like to say I have an observation. If it is right or wrong, but as an example, there is a child in good terms with his family, but the problem that his family is aggressive, that this child will go to school and be aggressive. So violence creates violence. Thank you. So violence generates violence. Right, you're right. I give the floor very briefly to Erqiya and to Najat, and I would like to inform you that you will have opportunities in the workshop, in the debate. Microphone, por favor.
داكور يلا.
انا غير عندي تعليق عام جدا من خلال يعني ما تم يعني ما جاء يعني جاءت به المداخلات.
So the intervention talks about the treating about this violence in schools, and the perpetrator's penalty doesn't yield any results. So at the collective level of the school, not only the perpetrators, but we focus on the only the perpetrators, solely the perpetrators, but we have to deal with the whole climate of the school and environment, and let everybody know, even the ones who have never indulged in such violations and such violence. Thank you very much. I will start by Yusuf, and then I'll carry on reacting to the or answering the questions. So this is what's so heavy concerning this morning is that when violence occurs in the household, it means that the student has already suffered from this violence at home, and violence has to be trivialized in school, and that's the message we'd like to get across in this report, which means implicitly that the school environment has to be secure and safe for children. That's why we've focused on the correlations with the general environment of the school and create a suitable environment. You've insisted, my colleague, on this, and we've dealt with different climates, the relations-based climate, and that creates the conditions for the well-being of the students and their feeling of belonging to the schooling institution. And there's also the educational climate, the climate of justice. Of course, children suffer from, or some of the students are punished by teachers. Is it just? Is this punishment just or unjust? There is also the question of safety, especially at the level of the peer impact. So we had to create an index of the climate in schools, which is attempting to reflect that throughout the years. That means in the secondary or in the primary, I would say that it's positive 100%, but it's positive at the junior high school and high school level. The climate and the index we've created tends to be more negative. This is regarding the school climate or environment. There was a question about the studies, and the studies are based on the students reporting. The study has chosen to be so because we had to take different elements into account, even parents, teachers, and the relationship between the students, their parents, their teachers, and also the headmasters of schools have contributed as well in helping us enlarge this study, which touched upon in the first place the schools and beyond school. We didn't go to search for the reasons of this violence, but we tried to find to detect the factors in the school environment. It's important to mention this element. This question occurs and reoccurs regarding the causes of this violence, which are sociological, cultural, and so on. These family aspects were not targeted by this study. This is all. I just wanted to react to these questions. Thank you very much, Rqia. Najat, the floor is yours. Briefly, a lot of things have been said. not only in Morocco, when we try to search for the one responsible for the violence, but the real debate is that we are under the umbrella of a system where a lot of elements interact and create this violence, be it intentional or unintentional. Sometimes the professor, the teachers, or the students. It's important to protect the children against all types of violence. It's easy to say than do. Talking about the schools, so the education system goes beyond the schools, the village, the education system. It's so huge. If we don't work with links, if we don't link the points and create one, if one chain goes bad, it can impact all the others. That's what we wanted to talk about. And my second point. You've come to us from Canada, and I think that it's important to answer you honestly. In Morocco, we have all the ingredients. We have the good analysis. We have good tools. But it's important to sit with the ones who use these elements, and the services are created for the students and teachers. If they are not happy, they can opt for the private sector. They can go to private schools or leave the schools. That's why we have to listen to everybody and build upon what they said. To respond to Yusuf, the domestic violence so we may be victims of violence, or when we witness violence on a daily basis, we suffer. We cannot avoid that and avoid talking about that. Tolerance is important. We talk about violence as if it's normal. We're about to normalize the word of violence, not only in Morocco, and that frightens me so much. When we talk about it, when we talk about this term, we've solved the problem. Frankly speaking, from now to tomorrow, over these 2 days or less than 2 days, we have to start talking about this. We have to start and try to activate, to put all of this into effect. The Minister of National Education can do great things here, but how to adapt this, what he decides in Ben Saleh, how we adapt it in the mountain, how we adapt it to different environments. We have the ingredients, and hopefully we'll find ways out and as to how to implement this. I think that all has been said. Everything has been said. There was a kind of diagnosis. We've covered the different facets of the theme that have been raised, the causes, the reasons, the price that is paid is so high, and it impacts the different facets of society and health. There are also experiences that we have to deploy and benefit from. But what is left is how to converge all these ideas and translate them into a reality. The reality of the Moroccan schools. And the reality of the Moroccan schools is the only one who has to embody everything that's been said and shared here when we say that violence exists in society and family, in the streets, as if to some extent we try to normalize this violence in the family, but at school, or the school has to be a safe environment for the students or the children. From schools, we may impact the family and extend the impact to other facets of our daily lives. We don't have to take it in this way, in this easy way, but it's a foundational aspect of all the other accompanying elements. And thank you very much for your contributions. Of course, these ideas will be translated into practice during the workshops and the upcoming panels. Thank you very much. I'm so happy this morning to be here with you.